Tale as old as time. A couple gets together. Apparently he's almost charged with stalking, and in order to make sure that stalking charge doesn't go through, he allegedly hires a hitman to take her out. And of course, I'm talking about his girlfriend, Megan Veritas. But let's break this down and see what's happening here. And joining me on set, not on Skype, on set, is criminal defense attorney Stephen Greenberg. Stephen, great to have you here on Law and Crime.
Good morning and happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Now let's talk about this. You said to me before we started, these cases never end up well, the hitman for hire cases, right?
Right, because you always go out and hire someone, inevitably it's always an undercover cop. It seems like every time you read about one of these cases, the person you went to hire dropped the dime on you with the cops.
Isn't it strange, though, that in order that he didn't want to be convicted of that stalking charge, and allegedly he thought it would be a better idea to commit an even worse crime of hiring a hitman to take her out. What is the rationale? Now, what you're seeing right there is the police stage these fake photos to convince Leon Jacob that they carried this out. This is very elaborate. Is this how it usually goes down?
Well, usually what happens in the cases that I've handled is you end up with an undercover cop, he's wearing a wire, you make the arrangements, they record you, and that's it. This is the most elaborate setup I've ever seen. And then they go to the house even and tell him that something unfortunate has happened and watch his reaction with the body cams on. This is far more elaborate. I think that what you're seeing here is how police are now using technology to help catch criminals.
Oh, this was a case to watch with a lot of moving parts, including the testimony of Motaz Aziz. And now this person, he's a former U.S. Army soldier who first got caught up in the Leon Jacob situation. Jacob thought that he was hiring this guy to do what exactly? Well, let's find out from Motaz.
Starting off with, you keep making a mention that Leon needed something to go to his lawyer. He had to show his lawyer. Do you know who that lawyer was by name, by chance?
No, I do not.
Okay, but do you know that it was not me or it was not George?
I believe it was a female because he kept on referring to her as her or she told me.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned earlier today that you received a $2,500 cash payment from Leon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall him ever giving you more money?
Yes.
Do you know how much money he did in fact give you?
I remember it was in total $9,980.
You said $9,998?
$80.
$80. Would you be surprised to hear that maybe it was closer to $15,000?
I'm not sure.
But he also gave you 2 Cartier watches, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall the value of those watches?
No, I do not. I did have receipts, and I was turned to the police. I just don't recall the exact.
And then also he gave you a diamond ring, is that correct?
Yes.
But when the police first contacted you, you didn't reveal any of that to them, did you?
I gave it to them.
At the very first meeting, you revealed that you had 2 watches?
I did not have them with me at that time.
When the police did first contact you, you only revealed $5,000 being given to you, is that correct?
At that time, I wasn't sure, and I explained that to the detective. And actually, I can't recall how I actually calculated the number 9,980, but this is where I got to whenever I told the detective. And the reason I remember is because keep up. Yeah.
Sorry. You came to that number after the fact, the 9,000 after the first meeting?
I tried, yeah, to recall exactly how much.
Excuse me. You cannot talk over each other. Let him finish before you speak, and you let him finish before you speak, please. Let's continue.
So at the first meeting with the police, you revealed only $5,000 being given to you. Is that correct?
As I recall, that's what I told him, yes. And I did explain that I wasn't sure.
Yes or no, answer me fine. So if that first meeting was $5,000, at the second meeting, you clarified how much money was actually taken.
Yes.
And after that, then you revealed that you also had 2 watches. Is that correct?
It was the same meeting.
It was an in-person interview.
Yes.
But at that time, you did not reveal the ring, did you?
It was, I can't recall. I did give it to the cop. It was actually fake.
But would you be surprised if you not give that ring back until the police came to question you about where the ring was?
No, I gave it to him. I mentioned it to him.
You did mention it to him?
Yes. I just told him it was fake, and I can't recall where I put it.
So you'd be surprised if an officer said, you know, I asked why you didn't explain these watches were the rings to me.
Can you slow down?
Yes, I apologize.
Can you re-ask the question?
Yes. So you would be surprised if an officer did state that he asked you why you didn't reveal the ring to him when you turned over.
So Leon Jacob thought he was hiring this guy to take out Megan Veritas, but it's not entirely clear what he thought. And, you know, I'm listening to this. Is the defense attorney trying to make the point that his client, Leon Jacob, was the victim here, that he was entrapped in a way, that he really didn't hire this guy to do anything, and that what he wanted was manipulated, that he was taken out of context?
I don't really get that, because there's a number of payments here. There's a cash payment, then there's some watches he gave the guy. The payments are weird amounts. I'm not really quite sure what was going on here, why this guy was taking things if he had no intention of doing anything, or why Leon kept paying him. It's very confusing.
Yeah, was the idea, because we'll hear later on when we play Leon Jacob, was the idea just to scare Megan? I mean, really the question is, how do you fight a solicitation for capital murder charge? You say, hey, I never wanted them to touch her. Maybe intimidate her, maybe scare her, but not to kill her or harm her anyway.
Right. So then you get somebody to go over and talk to her and say, hey, you know, you're going to ruin this guy's life. He wants to be a doctor one day. If this charge sticks, he'll never be able to be a doctor. Think about it, be sweet, you know. He'll go his way, you go your way. You talk to someone like that, you don't go over and say, hey man, if you show up in court, you know, you're going to end up sleeping with the fishes.
Let me ask you, like, anytime you have these cases, right, you want to be sympathetic to the defendant if you're representing. This is a guy that's hard to be sympathetic for, right? I mean, people have bad relationships, and he was being accused of stalking, but at the end of the day, this is not a sympathetic individual.
This is not a sympathetic individual. This is a manipulative individual, and that's part of the problem here.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, when we come back from our break, we're going to play you the testimony of Megan Veritas, his ex-girlfriend, the intended victim. And wait to hear what she has to say. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, we have an update for you regarding Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's being reported that she was just discharged from the hospital yesterday, and she's recuperating at home after undergoing surgery to remove 2 cancerous nodules from her left lung. Now, CNN has been reporting that there's no evidence of any remaining disease, nor is there evidence of any disease elsewhere in her body. They're getting that from the court, and she is recuperating at home. That is the latest development, and she is. We will let you know if there's anything else to report on that, but we wanted to give you that information. Now we're going to switch gears and focus back on the Leon Jacob case. Again, this murder for hire plot orchestrated allegedly by this doctor. Pretty unbelievable to talk about. We played you the testimony from the alleged hitman, and now we want to move on to Laura Thurlow, who's a paralegal in this case that has some very interesting information to share with the court. Take a look.
Next day, do you go back to work the next day?
Yes.
And are you still working in the same place?
Yes.
What building are you located in, or were you at the time?
The Lyric Center, downtown Houston.
Okay. And did he return to the Lyric Center the next day?
Yes, he did.
Talk to us about that.
The next day he came back and again was wanting to find out if criminal charges had been filed. He seemed a little upset that her vehicle wasn't there, couldn't understand why it wasn't there, because she was in charge of Super Bowl, I guess, reservations and things like that.
So she continues to say how Leon Jacob wanted to use a syringe to take out Megan Veritas. He would take care of the rest, and she interpreted it as this is just a guy who's lovesick. What do you make of that?
The whole thing gets more and more bizarre. So they ride in a car, in a Mercedes station wagon of all cars, and they ride to a Holiday Inn parking lot. So you've got the Mercedes and the Holiday Inn. There's certainly some opposites there. And then he starts asking this person who he barely knows to drug somebody, bring them to him so that he can do what? I mean, the thing just gets more and more out of hand.
What I'm confused about is there an avenue as a defense attorney and saying, look, this guy's a smart guy. All right, you know, medically trained, he knows what's going on, you hear him on the stand, he speaks well. How could someone be this dumb and come up with this plot and tell a million different people and try to get different people involved? It doesn't make sense. Is that an avenue to say, if you really believe, do you really believe this? How could someone do this? Is that a way you can explore this as a defense attorney?
Well, the problem with the charge is that the charge is solicitation, so the charge is the asking. You don't really have to have the ability to carry it out.
Yeah.
And that's where that's a problem. So I think the fact that he's lovesick, you could say he's just rambling and rambling. You know, did he give someone a syringe? Did he do anything to carry the plot out? That might be an avenue of attack.
Okay, well, let's listen right now to the intended victim, Megan Veritas, the ex-girlfriend of Leon Jacob, who, remember, she staged this whole kidnapping. You saw the videos, the pictures of her with tape on her mouth, looked like she was kidnapped. Let's listen to her testimony right now.
This has been a long time coming, or was this going to be a surprise to the defendant that this was the end of your relationship?
It was a long time coming. I tried to leave several times.
And so was this the final straw for you?
Correct.
So while you're staying over at Leslie's house, you mentioned that he's calling you, he's emailing you, he's texting you. Does he actually show up?
Yes.
What happens when he shows up?
The first day he showed up, he left a bag of my clothing and flowers with a card. The second day, when Leslie and I were there by ourselves, he came in and knocked on the door, and I obviously didn't want to be near him, so I hid in a closet.
You did what?
Hid in a closet.
Why did you hide in a closet?
Because I was afraid of Leon.
What happened while you were hiding in that closet?
He came in and was screaming and yelling at Leslie, and basically continued to yell and was looking for me. And he said, "I know that bitch is here."
So he said, "I know that bitch is here."
Mm-hmm.
Could you hear him saying that?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very scared.
How long do you think you had to hide in that closet for?
It was about 5-10 minutes because Leslie had asked him to leave because her daughter was sleeping.
Did he eventually leave?
Yes.
How did that affect how you felt about your safety around the defendant?
I was terrified.
Steve, can you believe watching her on the stand and thinking she's looking at the guy that she used to be in a relationship with, and the reality of the situation is she's testifying against him in a murder for hire plot where she thought that he was going to try and kill her. This is just so crazy, and it's sometimes unbelievable to believe that we cover these kinds of cases.
Well, and she's enjoying every minute of it. You can tell. She smirks at a few places because she clearly wants to stick it to him.
Well, that's a great point, and that leads us into where we're going to go next after our break, where she talks about staging the kidnapping. We'll be right back.
I got in a vehicle with the police officers and went to a location to take photos.
Do you know why they wanted to take photos of you?
Because
Asking for the mindset of the officers.
If she knows,
in
Judge.
this action.
I think she can testify if she knows. So, Megan.
because somebody had been paid to kill me and they needed that as backup. Or
So did they ask you to stage some photographs making it look like you had actually been kidnapped?
yes.
Before I show you these photographs, can you describe for the members of the jury what they had you do?
I sat in a chair in a warehouse, and they zip tied my hands and my feet and put duct tape around my mouth to make me look as if I had been kidnapped. I had sat in that parking lot for an extended period of time, so I was crying and really upset.
Okay, I'm going to show you now what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 22, 23, and 24. Are those the photographs that were taken of you back in March of 2017 as part of the investigation?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this State offers States Exhibit 22, 23, and 24. And I'll tender to opposing counsel for any objection.
All right, let's break this down. So my question is, you were saying this is very elaborate, right? Does this happen this much where you try to get a defendant by creating this whole fake scenario, a staged kidnapping? Let's show those photos. Look at that right there. This is all fake. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this?
I've never seen the police go to this extreme. Usually they wire up the supposed hitmen. Here it's supposedly a cop, so they could have done that, and they get admissions. Maybe they didn't get enough, so they had to take these extra steps. But I don't know that it helps their case.
That's Valerie McDaniel's boyfriend. He's alive. That was all staged. What's the line there between entrapment and, which is illegal, and here trying to say we just caught him in the act?
Well, entrapment is a defense. I don't know that it's necessarily illegal, so to speak. But when they have entrapment, you have to show as a defendant that you weren't predisposed to commit this crime. So they would have to prove to show they were entrapped that they never had any idea of killing anyone. Like the police came to me and they said, hey, wouldn't you like her killed so she didn't show up at your stalking trial? No, I don't want that. Come on, man, don't you want it? No, I don't want that. And then they berate them until finally they say, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea.
Right, and there's flavors of that in this trial, but there's one thing Leon Jacob would have a difficult time arguing, and that is the body cam footage of Officer Frank Quinn that captures the reactions of Leon Jacob at a very critical time. Take a look.
Turns out to be a fatality. That's what confused. Looks like it might have been robbery gone wrong. Sorry to have to tell you. Did you heard from him recently?
I was there last night.
You heard from him last night?
I was at the house last night.
Was he there? Tell him was that.
I called the police.
Good. Why'd you go to the police for
Because he hit my daughter.
That was last night.
Up to this point, Sergeant, did you know where Leon Jacob was?
Yes, sir. We knew he was up there in another room somewhere.
Okay. At this point, is anybody searching the apartment to find him or anything like that?
No, everything has to appear normal, as it would just in a routine notification.
Okay.
Oh, I saw him this morning. This morning.
Do you have anyone you can call to help you to stay with you?
My daughter here. I saw him this morning when I went to school because I was worried. He was supposed to drop her off. The police told him that he had to drop her off at school this morning, so I went to drive him.
When was that the last time you saw him? Did he let you know he was going anywhere and everything? Or?
No, he was all smiles and being nice in front of my daughter.
Okay. All right, well, I'll tell you, we'll need you to come with us, and
Also, I guess I'll stay here.
okay, look, right now we're going to read you your rights. Me? Both of you are being arrested for solicitation, capital murder. What? Solicitation murder. Do you like the money side?
Wait, listen real quick. Who do you think you're talking to, okay?
Can I put some shoes on?
Yeah, you will. Yeah, man. He's still talking to you. We're not going anywhere right now, okay?
Why are we being arrested? You just started.
Just put your palms together. Put your palms together.
Stop making a statement all in. Man, probably wants to use it as evidence against you in the trial. You're right.
Okay, Steve, so we just saw this body cam footage. Do you think it's incriminating? I mean, he seemed to be providing a lot of information when he didn't have to, and he kept talking. What do you think?
Well, you can't ever judge how someone's going to react in this situation when someone tells you that someone else has died. I don't think it's incriminating because they say to him, hey, do you have any information? He says, we were here all night. Now everyone wants to say, okay, all of a sudden he's giving an alibi when no one asked him for an alibi, but it's responsive to the question. We were here all night. I don't know anything.
But why is he giving his whole schedule of his day when he didn't really need to? I mean, the opposite argument is he's explaining away immediately because he knows what the truth is.
Well, he obviously set it up. He might know what the truth is, but in getting there, he has set up a story. I was here, and here. And yeah, he wants to get it out, but you know they're going to ask.
Well, do juries take this into account, these kinds of body cam footage videos of any time you can see and hear the defendant beforehand?
Well, it makes it impossible to be able to argue that the cops are making it up.
That's
you know, we used to
be
be able to say that the police know what they want to say. My guy didn't say this. Now we can't do that anymore.
It's a good point. And I'll tell you what, we talk so much about the defense. Who better to defend themselves than Leon Jacob? Because he took the stand in his own defense. And when we come back, we're going to play you that testimony. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We're recapping some really interesting cases today. Our first block is going to be the hitman for hire cases. And right now we're focusing on the Leon Jacob trial. And you're joining us at a great time because we're about to play you the testimony from when the defendant himself took the stand and said, I'm completely innocent. I didn't hire anybody to kill anybody. Really? Let's see.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of this jury about the split, the initial split that you had with Megan. What happened?
I'll get there. We had a pretty heated argument the night of January 12th of 2017. The argument started over the fact that sort of by accident I had discovered that she had been moving money out of our joint checking account for quite some time into somewhere else, or she was taking cash withdrawals, and I confronted her about that, and we had a really bad fight.
Approximately how much money did you approximately?
It was several $1,000s. I really hadn't discovered a lot at that time because it was kind of shocking to me that what was going on. I have since, after that, found more, but the initial thing that took my attention was there was a $500 paycheck that she wrote to herself out of our personal account on January 5th of 2017. Subsequently, the day I came back from visiting my children in Chicago, she picked me up at the airport, and things seemed fine.
This is
fine. Go ahead.
Okay, Steve, when we talk about being relatable to the defendant, do you think that there's an aspect here where people could say, hey, listen, I've been in bad breakups before. I'm listening to this. I kind of get where he's coming from.
Yeah, at this part you can. Although he seems a little swarmy, so to speak. He just doesn't come across. I don't like the look. I don't like the hair. I don't like the glasses. He just looks like someone that if he walked into a bar, you'd think he's about to put one over on you.
Well, a little bit later on, he'll call himself, a womanizer in a way, and how irresistible he is. He's got these multiple women. But let's continue on with his testimony, talking about the breakup with Megan that precipitated all of this.
Testimony that she moved out.
She left that evening. She left all of her belongings there, so she didn't move out that night. In fact, I moved all of my stuff out about 4 days later.
And did you also move some of her stuff out?
No, I left her clothes, anything that was hers, I left there. As far as I didn't touch any of her clothes or any of her toiletries or anything. I took my clothing and I took our furniture.
At a later time, you got back together with her, correct?
No. Not after January 12th.
Okay, so the breakup didn't go so well. Now the question is, first of all, let's take a step back. Is it a good idea to put him on the stand in this case? Do they have to put him on the stand in this particular case? We see it so much in self-defense cases, but in this kind of particular trial, is it necessary?
They've got all these people who say he asked them to do things. He's got to explain it. He has to explain why he gave someone money and watches. He has to explain the breakup. He has to explain his reaction from the body cam. So I don't think they have any choice.
Now, as we will play more and more, he seems to say that he was misinterpreted. Is that a fair defense, that they took words out of context? I never said this. I never meant this. Is that fair?
Well, I don't think he has a choice. What else is he going to say? Yeah, I wanted the you-know-what dead. So he has to try and say, look, I'm a good guy. Everyone else doesn't get me. And that's what he's trying to say. I don't like the way it's going. First of all, I don't like the lawyer sitting there so casual, yellow legal pad in his lap, asking questions. It doesn't make it seem like it's an important story that the defendant's telling.
You mentioned his demeanor, the way he appears on the stand. What we've noticed a lot through his testimony is he takes pauses before giving answers. Some might see that as he wants to think about his answers. Some might think that he's telling a lie. I'm curious your perspective on it.
Well, on the direct examination, everyone's going to assume he's already gone over this with his lawyer time and time again. This is the problem. If he spouts out the answer right away, it's rehearsed. If he takes too long to think about it, he has to remember what he was supposed to say. When I have a defendant on the stand in a case, I usually get in and get out, meaning I ask him a few questions. Did you do this? No. And then I let the prosecutor have at him and cross-examination. That's the best way for the defendant to get out a story, because then you can say, look at how they attacked him and look how good he did.
Now, I'm going to tell you right now, he gets a little testy under cross-examination. What happens to a jury when they see that, a defendant getting a little too much, a little testy? We saw it a little bit in the Jason Van Dyke trial, but when a defendant gets a little, rough with the cross-examination, what does that tell you if you're sitting on the jury?
It tells you when the core accusation is stalking, that he put a hand over her mouth and so forth, that maybe this is the kind of guy who's capable of doing that.
And maybe hiring a hitman to take out an ex-girlfriend.
Maybe.
We have a lot more testimony, though, of his to play. It was a highlight of this trial, and we're going to play more of that. He's going to discuss, actually, the payments, because that became such a critical issue. What was he paying for exactly? But that's not the only thing that we're going to talk about. When we come back, we're going to talk about the latest legal debacle for actor Kevin Spacey. And if you haven't seen this video that he just posted, we have it for you, and we have a lot more to talk about. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. I don't know. Do we miss him? I don't know. I'm here again with criminal defense attorney Stephen Greenberg. Do we miss him? I mean, my question to you is, and we just talked about this, the timing of this couldn't have been coincidence. He gets charged and this video comes out. What's going on?
Well, he probably made this a long time ago, but, each time I watch it, I'm sort of understanding it a little bit more. He does say in there, look, there are things I'm not going to get in trouble for, things I didn't do. He says that. The whole truth is going to come out. You're going to want to know the truth. So he does say some things in there, which initially I thought, what a bizarre video. Teasing, hey, when the whole truth comes out, I didn't do anything wrong. But as a defense lawyer, boy, why would you want this out there at all?
What is this, for a potential jury? They're not supposed to see this, and you don't want them seeing this. So my question is, really, who did he make this for? Is there a large community of Kevin Spacey fans that want him to post this? Because I haven't seen it. It's not for the makers of making of House of Cards, because they never want to work with him again. So why did he post this?
I can't get inside his mind. I suppose it's better to be this character than the guy from The Usual Suspects. Which would have been a worse character.
Why did he go in character? My last question. Wouldn't it have been much more powerful if he came out as Kevin Spacey and gave a direct message?
Yeah, he's clearly got some issues going on.
Yeah, that's...
I'm a defense lawyer. I'm not a psychiatrist.
Well, there you go. Well, as soon as we have more information about Mr. Spacey, we'll make sure to let you know, and that arraignment is coming up in a few weeks. A lot of time. We'll see what happens. Let's switch gears, though, and focus now back on the Leon Jacob case. And where we last left off, we were playing you the testimony of Leon Jacob himself. The defendant took the stand and explaining a little bit more about those payments. And that's where we get in here. What was he paying for exactly? Did he want to take out Megan Veritas, his ex-girlfriend? Or was this all a big misunderstanding? Let's hear from Mr. Jacob himself.
What was the purpose of that meeting from your perspective?
It was to finalize some plans that I had had with somebody I had thought to be a private investigator, who we called Zach or Abraham, who has been identified in court here as Motaz Aziz. He had told Valerie and I that some of the things that we had discussed with him, that he'd become too close to us.
Sustained.
Sorry.
At some point in time, there was a discussion that's been testified to you, or by you, not by you, but by the undercover officer about the discussion that he had with Valerie about her ex. Recall that?
I do.
And did you participate in that discussion?
I did not.
What did you exactly do to extract yourself from that conversation?
I left the table. I was previous to them talking, Valerie had, them even coming to the restaurant, Valerie had said she wanted to talk to Aziz and the guy we called Adam. We met as Adam by herself. And that she said that when she wanted to talk to them, that she'd asked me to leave the restaurant.
And did you?
I did.
Okay, back here with criminal defense attorney Stephen Greenberg. How's he doing so far?
Well, in the words of the defendant, can I restate my previous answer that maybe he had to testify? It's awful. We had money under the laundry, and then I left the room, and I wasn't sure what the money was for. It was for services, but I don't know what the services are. He's digging himself a big hole.
You've never given money and Cartier watches to somebody and really not 100% sure what the purpose is?
Under a pile of laundry. Under a pile of laundry.
How would you change the questioning if you had the ability to direct examine him and he was your client?
You know, you can't tell someone to lie, and that's the problem here. He just everything about what he's saying, the story that he's telling, is digging him a deeper hole. Maybe he shouldn't have testified in this case.
And the question is, I mean, just everything from the demeanor to the pauses, is it seem fabricated, what he's saying?
Well, it doesn't seem fabricated. It seems like he's telling the truth. He's twisting it a little bit, but the truth that he's telling is proving the crime. The things he's doing, licking his lips, biting his lips, offering to restate answers, trying to control the examination, all of that is going to make the jury think that he's trying to manipulate their thought process.
What do you think about the fact that Valerie McDaniel, his girlfriend that he allegedly plotted with to kill their exes, she killed herself before trial? Now, what do you think about that? You're not sitting on this jury. What do you think about that?
Well, that's pretty good evidence that she thought she was going to go to jail for the rest of her life. I mean, I don't know what motivates someone to do that, but that's just awful.
Yeah, it's another awful component of this very, very bizarre set of details. I want to continue playing Leon Jacob. Again, this is the defendant testifying in his own defense. Take a look.
I heard some testimony here that you had conversations with the undercover officer Duran about wanting to kill Megan and McDaniel.
That's correct.
All right. Tell us your recollection of the content of those conversations, if they in fact occurred.
Well, I can't really give you a recollection of something that didn't happen. I never asked anybody to kill anybody.
Does the word kill, hurt, harm, in any way, shape, or form appear in any of those recorded conversations?
Not on my behalf.
I'm sorry?
Except for to exclude them from things I want done. I never asked to have anybody hurt, killed, harmed, kidnapped, or I never asked for anybody to be in any way physically hurt.
Did you pay money at all for this purpose?
No.
All right.
Well, there was no purpose for me to pay money towards anybody being hurt because I never asked for that.
Now, we've heard testimony about there being money that had been, I believe, transmitted to Megan or to the undercover officer. What was the purpose of giving the money to the undercover officer as far as Megan's concerned?
It had nothing to do with Megan at all.
All right. Who did it have to deal with?
It had to do with an advance payment on what Valerie and the undercover officer had agreed upon because of expenses that he needed to hotel and whatnot. For the time that he was there, he had explained to me that,
So, Steve, he says that he never directly wanted anyone harmed, anyone killed, never used these words like kill, hurt, harm, anything like that. Is that enough? Is that to say, hey, well, maybe then that's not solicitation for capital murder, or can you prove it without those direct words?
Well, cases get proven all the time by circumstantial evidence. They don't need direct evidence. The problem is that he's saying we were paying for services. Valerie was talking about having this done. I was sitting there. He's hanging himself with this testimony.
But if this is a different kind of charge, right? Solicitation of capital murder. You can prove a murder case with circumstantial evidence. But here, if you need that language to say, I directly requested this to happen, and you don't have that per se, isn't that enough to acquit him?
So if you say that the defendant said to the officer, I want her to be sleeping with the fishes. Okay, we've all heard that. We all know what that means. That doesn't say, I want her killed, I want her dead, but we all know what it means, right? And he didn't use the magic language.
But what we also saw flavor was, well, how do you know what's joking? How do you know what's hyperbole? Examples. So that's the question.
You don't pay someone to joke. I don't pay someone to laugh at my jokes, do I?
So it's the payment that's really key here, not just the language.
Sure, it's the payment for services.
Interesting. What those services are, let's examine a little bit more. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a lot more to discuss in the Leon Jacob Hitman for Hire trial. Welcome back, everybody. You're joining us at a great time. We're recapping the testimony of Leon Jacob in the Hitman for Hire case, one of two that we're going to be covering here today. And right now, we played you the testimony of Leon Jacob under direct examination, talking about how everything got carried away, and he's not guilty of solicitation for capital murder. This is all a misunderstanding. Let's see, though, how he did under cross-examination. I'm going to tell you right now, one of these clips that's played is one of my favorite exchanges probably in any trial. But before we get there, let's just play a little bit of him under cross-examination explaining his relationship with Megan and when things took a sour turn.
When you were upset with Megan from taking money from the account, that's really kind of silly, right? Because she was the only one that was really putting money in the account, correct?
No.
She had a job at the time, right?
Yes.
She worked at the hotel, correct?
Yes.
She was the one who paid your rent.
She wrote the checks for the rent, yes.
She paid the rent from the money she made at the hotel, correct?
Incorrect.
She paid for your dog.
She bought the dog. Actually, she never paid for the dog.
She paid for your groceries.
She went to the grocery store, yes.
She paid for the groceries.
If you mean she went to the store and used our debit card to buy the groceries, then that's correct, yes.
Okay. And during the time that Megan lived down here in Houston, she was always employed, correct?
That's not correct.
And she was always bringing in money to your household, wasn't
That's
she?
not correct.
And would you agree with me that you all had many fights about the fact that she was frustrated that you didn't have a job?
You can characterize it as that, yes.
That she was frustrated?
Yes.
And that she was frustrated that she felt like she was the one that was paying for everything, correct?
Those were her opinions, yes.
Okay. And she was frustrated because she felt like you were sitting home at the apartment all day and she was the one at work bringing home money, correct?
If she wants to characterize it as that, yes.
She expressed that to you, correct?
A couple of times, yes.
When she says you put hands on her, you disagree with that?
Absolutely.
But you'd agree with me that after that night, just like you said, just like that, she was gone, right?
Yes.
And she didn't want anything to do with you after that, did she?
I'm not particularly sure you could characterize it as that.
Do you think, and one of the concepts that has come up from his testimony, is that he seems to be the smartest person in the room. He acts like he's the smartest person in the room. Do you get a sense of that? That was one of the criticisms of his testimony.
I get the sense that he is, he doesn't think he should be subjected to this examination. Why are they wasting everyone's time by questioning his story? He comes across as a bit arrogant. I don't know about the smartest. One of the things he's doing on cross that I don't like is that he's sticking to one-word answers. So on direct, he was very talkative. He explained things. On cross, he's allowing her to control him by just giving yes, no, maybe, you know, I did, I didn't kind of answers. He should be slowing her down by saying, no, I didn't do that, here's what happened, and offering up his story.
But so many times we know that cross-examination can get combative, and it's not that comfortable line of questioning that you see under direct. So isn't this naturally to be expected, or do people get too quick to put their back up?
Well, that's what you need to avoid as a defendant. You need to control the cross-examination. Very hard to do.
All right, well, I want you to stand by, Steve, because this is probably one of my favorite clips of any testimony we have had here on Law and Crime. Take a listen to how he does under cross-examination when he's grilled about a specific subject. Take a look.
Do you recall back on March the 2nd of 2017 texting Valerie McDaniel saying, did you know that you have been laid 44 straight days in a row now?
I don't recall the exact date or what I wrote, but it sounds like something I would have communicated to Valerie.
And if that's correct, you'd agree with me that that would have put you sleeping with Valerie McDaniel just 7 days after you and Megan broke up, correct?
If the math is correct, yes.
Okay. So when you tell the members of this jury that you're heartsick over Megan, that's not really true, is it? Because it sure didn't take you long to move on, did it?
Matters of the heart and how you feel are subject to the way you feel at a moment. I mean, you're asking me to get up here and say that I'm some womanizer. That's fine. You can characterize me as that. It doesn't make me guilty of solicitation of capital murder. I have no problem sitting here and saying that I slept with Valerie 7 days after Megan and I broke up. But I'm not on trial for being a womanizer. I'm on trial for solicitation of capital murder. So you can assassinate my character all you want up here. It doesn't make me guilty of what you charged me with.
I appreciate that, Mr. Jacob, but my question was, isn't it true that just 7 days after you and Megan broke up that you were sleeping with Valerie McDaniel?
I think he answered.
Absolutely.
Okay. And
Oh, I love that so much. What do you make of that testimony?
He's getting defensive, and it wouldn't be problematic except while he's doing it, he's doing with his eyes everywhere. His eyes are darting around everywhere, and he's not controlling her. He needs to control the prosecutor when he's saying that. He needs to look at her and say, look, you can call me whatever you want. You can slander my character as much as you want, but I didn't do this. And he doesn't do it like that. He's so, but I'm not.
The content of what he said, though, and this is an interesting point, right? If he was so quick to move on from her, then he wouldn't necessarily be obsessed with her to want her taken out. Isn't that another way of looking at it?
Well, there's two different ways. You can look at it that if he was so in love with her, he wouldn't want to have her killed because he loved her so much. Or you could look at it the way you are, that if he was moving on so quickly, he wasn't so obsessed with her. I tell people all the time that a criminal trial is like a physics experiment. For every action, there's a reaction. For everything I say, they say something. For everything they say, I say something. And it just matters how it comes out to the jury.
We talked about in the break, isn't it incredible that if you believe this story put forward by the state, he found his perfect match, Valerie McDaniel, another person. They both agreed to take out their exes. Isn't love so amazing like that?
You wonder, hey, You walk up to someone at a bar, can I buy you a drink? Do you want to have your ex killed? I do too. We have so much in common.
Well, that's one icebreaker. I don't know how it works all the time, but I'll tell you what. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to cover more of this testimony, including his plan with a common law marriage. We'll get to that in a second, but a lot more we're covering here on Law and Crime, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. Now, one of the themes that we're covering here on the network is going to be a little bit later on, police-involved shootings. And we're going to cover the Laquan McDonald shooting, both from the Jason Van Dyke trial as well as the police cover-up trial. And I want to talk to Stephen Greenberg about this. First up, one of the things we're waiting for in the police cover-up trial, the 3 officers who are on trial for allegedly making up details and trying to protect Jason Van Dyke, is we haven't had a decision in that case. They're charged with conspiracy, official misconduct, and obstruction of justice. Why do you think the judge is taking so long to render a decision? Because remember, this isn't a jury trial. This is a bench trial. The judge makes the decision. Why is it taking so long?
You know, you would think that she could do it right at the end of the trial. It wasn't a complicated trial. There were some police reports. They're either truthful or not truthful. They either talked about coming up with a story or not, didn't talk about coming up with a story. I know that she's reviewing all the transcripts. She's looking at all of the exhibits. I think she wants to make sure that whichever way she decides the case, that she can explain the verdict, because it's going to get a lot of scrutiny, certainly far more than any other case.
But do you think it's going to get the same kind of attention in the sense that Van Dyke was? I mean, when the Van Dyke verdict came down, all of Chicago was waiting. Do you think the same thing's going to happen here with the cop cover-up?
Well, I think that if she finds them not guilty, she's going to get a lot of blowback from people, because in Chicago we seem to have this problem of police officers falsifying things. Now, I don't know. I didn't hear all the evidence. I don't know what she's going to do. But I think that if she's going to find them not guilty, she wants to make sure that she can explain it perfectly. By the same token, if she's going to find them guilty, they deserve to know why they're being found guilty.
Now, the Van Dyke verdict, guilty, second-degree murder, 16 counts of aggravated battery. How has that changed the landscape of maybe the Chicago law enforcement and maybe just law enforcement in general? There was a reason so much attention was brought to this case. Have you seen a change in the dynamic?
In Chicago, everyone talks about Chicago crime. The biggest problem we have in Chicago, if I can editorialize a little bit, is that the police just don't arrest anybody anymore, because the police are afraid. And everything, like we saw the body cam earlier, everything's on camera now. So the police can't be proactive anymore, because if they're proactive, they get sued. I understand their position. I feel sorry for them to some extent. If you follow the rules, you do good police work, you'll make the arrest. But in Chicago, they're all running scared.
It's interesting because you also don't want what happened here trigger happy.
Right.
Firing multiple shots into a man who had a knife that was walking, and didn't seem to be a threat.
There does not seem to be any reason why that young man was shot. None of the other officers shot him. It seems like a complete overreaction, but it's something we've seen all too often in Chicago.
All right, so we're going to cover that a little bit later on in the program. Right now, though, we're going to focus back on our theme for this morning, which is Hitman for Hire trials, and we're back with the Leon Jacob trial. Right before we left, we were playing the testimony of the defendant himself. Let's continue on.
While you're at Olive Garden, you mentioned that Valerie has a conversation with Javier, and you know nothing about what was said, right?
No, I do not. I did not at the time. I know now.
Well, you knew then too, didn't you?
No.
Well, because do you recall coming back to the table at the Olive Garden and Javier telling you she wants her ex-husband dead?
I don't really recall that. He may have said it, but I don't remember.
So you're agreeing to give him $2,500 just after he tells you, I'm going to put a bullet in his head and throw him on the street.
If that's what you say.
Well, that's in the recording. It's not what I say. It's what Javier and you said, right?
I guess.
Remember, he's on the stand trying to say that his words were manipulated. He never wanted to hurt or harm anybody. The question is this becoming more and more difficult for him to do that? Let's continue on with his testimony.
Did you not want anybody hurt when you said, inject her with potassium chloride, stop her heart, untraceable?
I said that was something you could do. I didn't say that for him to do that.
You'd agree with me that if you injected someone with potassium chloride and stopped their heart, that it would hurt them?
Yes.
It would kill them?
Yes.
You knew that as a doctor.
Yes.
You were upset that Megan had filed assault family member charges against you, weren't you?
Anybody would be upset about having a false police report filed against them.
Well, that didn't work out the way that I think that he wanted, right, Steve? I mean, did you see him squirming a little bit?
Well, at this point, I'd like to be crawling under the table as the defense lawyer.
I mean, how does he you can see the wheels working. The way that I saw it is he's being asked, isn't that kidnapping? What did you have planned? And he's trying, did you think his responses were evasive, that he's trying to make up answers? I mean, what did you think of it?
I think it would have been better off if he said, when I said snatch, I actually meant I wanted more of the endless salad and the bread bowl at the Olive Garden. What I don't understand, you have a recording, so you can't explain away the recording. So why are you on the stand saying anything? Your attorney can argue the recording doesn't mean certain things. The recording's not enough. But when he's up there, I didn't really know what the money was for, but yeah, I wanted her snatched and taken and do whatever you have to do. I don't want her around, and he can't explain it.
Okay, is that solicitation for capital murder if you say to someone, hey, take her somewhere, threaten her, say threaten her parents, but never directly says, if that doesn't work, kill her. If that doesn't work, do what you have to do. It's in your hands. Is that directly saying to somebody, you can kill her?
No, it's certainly not, and that's a good argument that could have been made by his attorney. The problem is that as you're watching this guy, you're saying, this is the kind of guy that would be capable of this. This is the kind of guy that would ask for this to be done. Look at him. Doesn't this guy look like someone who wants someone murdered because his life is more important than anything?
You made a great point earlier how on his testimony it seems that he wants to control the line of questioning. He wants to control his answers. Could you be sitting on the jury and say, well, this is just another example of his control?
Right, he's a control freak. That's exactly what he is. And he sees women as a means to an end. They've already got before this jury that this is a guy who lives off of women, has them paying the bills for him, and then when he's done with them, he wants to discard them.
So how do you recover from this? So if under redirect, how do you recover from what's happening so far under cross-examination?
It's impossible on this one. You can't all of a sudden make him likable. You can't undo the damage that he's done.
Yeah, well, that's one way of looking at it. Okay, I think we have to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to hit you with the verdict in the Leon Jacob case. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. All right, everybody, we're coming to the conclusion of our first trial that we're recapping today, the Leon Jacob case. But before we reveal the verdict, how can we not play a little bit more of Leon Jacob on the stand? Take a look.
The evidence of State's Exhibit number 22. Do you remember Officer Duran sending you this photograph?
I remember him sending me something like that or similar.
So at the time, it was your belief that Megan Veracruz was somewhere zip-tied, correct?
Yes.
And it was your belief that your Megan Veracruz was somewhere with duct tape wrapped around her mouth, right?
Yes.
And in seeing this picture, you'd agree with me at no time did you tell Officer Duran, whoop, time out, stop, this has gone too far, I don't want any part of this. You never said that, did you?
Not those exact words, I did not.
You didn't tell him stop?
I tried to delay him.
Mr. Jacob, my question is, did you tell Officer Duran stop?
No.
Did you tell Officer Duran, I don't like where this is going?
Not those exact words.
You didn't use those words, did you?
No.
No. In fact, you are under the belief, while you're talking to Officer Duran, that Megan is somewhere in this city tied up, bound, duct taped, and you're having conversations with Officer Duran during that, right?
Yes.
And at this point, you also believe that Mac McDaniel is dead.
Yes.
Did you offer to help Officer Duran inject Megan with a syringe?
I think I did.
Did you offer to help Officer Duran inject Megan with potassium chloride?
I think I did.
Did you?
Yes.
And you know as a doctor that potassium chloride will kill someone.
Yes.
And so by helping him inject Megan with potassium chloride, it would result in her death.
That would be the logical conclusion.
Steve, thoughts?
Why is he testifying?
A little different than what you said earlier on.
Yeah, what is he trying to explain? He's trying to explain that he committed the crime? He's injecting someone with a syringe?
Could it be that, look, he's going to be honest, and he's going to be honest about details that are a little startling, what he wanted her kidnapped, wanted her threatened, but doesn't mean that he wanted her killed. Is there a way that you could flavor that argument?
Well, I don't know how much of this is recorded undercover by the officers and what wasn't. It seems like he's filling in a lot of blanks that really are going to prove the case for the prosecution. This is just giving them a chance to go through their entire case, piece by piece by piece.
But is there an argument to be said, hey, listen, we've seen cases before where if you can admit the bad parts about a defendant, here this is really bad. And we're talking situations where you admit that they cheated on their spouses and they're not good people. Doesn't mean that you should maybe believe when they say that they had nothing to do with the murder, or they had nothing to do with planning a murder or soliciting a murder. Maybe is that a way to say it?
Well, the problem here is the bad parts would have been if he said, I actually put my hand over her mouth, which he didn't say, I just put it in front of her face. The really bad parts are what he keeps admitting. The really, really bad parts.
Yeah, well, let's see what happened, okay? So the jury had a decision to make. Would they find him guilty of these 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder? Let's see.
Mr. Gidley, has the jury reached unanimous verdicts on both cases? Would you hand those verdicts to my bailiff? Would the defendant please stand? As to cause number 1543813, State of Texas versus Leon Philip Jacob. Will the jury find the defendant Leon Philip Jacob guilty of solicitation of capital murder as charged in the indictment signed by the foreman of the jury? Cause number 1543812. Will the jury find the defendant Leon Philip Jacob guilty of solicitation of capital murder as charged in the indictment? All right, thank you. You may be seated.
Okay, so he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. That verdict, no emotion. What goes on in the mind of both the defense counsel and the client when that verdict is read down?
There's nothing more nerve-wracking than when the jury's out deliberating and then they come back and you think to yourself, okay, they came back quickly. Is that good or bad? They took a long time. Is it good or bad? You know, you never know. And I certainly would never want to be the defendant waiting in angst to decide your fate. Here's someone is he going to spend the rest of his life in jail? It looked to me like he already knew what was happening.
He had to have expected at least that. Now, his attorneys have said that they plan to file an appeal. What grounds do you think that they might have to do that?
You know, I don't know all the trial rulings, the pretrial rulings. I don't know what evidence they tried to put in. But what else are you going to do? You're not going to just say, well, we're not going to do anything. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in jail.
And what's his life going to look like in prison?
My guess is he's not going to have a real easy time unless he changes who he is and how he acts.
You mean his whole demeanor has to change to be suitable in a life in prison?
Well, you know, for this kind of crime, solicitation of capital murder, you're probably going to a maximum security institution in Texas. I don't think you're going to have real nice people there. He's kind of a pretty boy, went to med school. He's going to have a real rough time in prison.
And people sometimes get confused about how long it takes to appeal. So what would be his best case scenario if he got a successful appeal and a new trial and was released from prison? Like, how many years from now would that be a realistic possibility for him?
I think that differs depending on where you're at. From what I know of Texas, he might be looking at 2-3 years for direct appeal to play out. And then who knows if he's let out of custody, if he gets a new trial, the evidence isn't going to get any better for this guy. That's the problem.
And you know what's interesting? We cover these hitman trials, and I can't believe how much they happen. And here, Steve, this was the one where thankfully no one got harmed. Yes, Valerie McDaniel killed herself, but here the intended victims, they were not harmed. Unfortunately, that was not the case for the next trial that we're going to be covering, the Christopher Love case, where this man was hired to take out a beautiful dentist. And unfortunately, he succeeded. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll cover it. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. All right, a recipe for disaster right here. Let's bring in some guests to talk about perspective on this case. Joining me right now, criminal defense attorney Jared Whaley. Jared, good to have you here on Law and Crime.
Morning, Jesse. Thanks for having me on again.
Now, one of the things I was saying is covering these murder for hire cases, is this a rarity? And if so, how rare is it for it actually to work out? I mean, if you take the prosecution's theory and take it for what it is, this was successful. They killed the intended target. We covered the Leon Jacob case where thankfully no one was harmed. So how often do you see these kind of cases, and how often are they successful?
I think they're pretty rare, but when they do work out, they tend to be very high profile. There's a very high profile murder for hire case going on here in Florida right now. We just saw another case in Texas, so I can't speak to how often they happen, but it does seem that they garner a lot of coverage when they do work out as a.
Yeah, and I'm back here also with criminal defense attorney Stephen Greenberg. And Stephen, one of the things that we talked about in the opening part of the show was how many executions happen in Texas, because this is a death penalty case. So interesting statistic when we threw it up there. What do you think about that, Texas having so many executions?
You know, I think it's offensive that anyone's executing anyone nowadays. We've seen in Illinois, where I'm from, dozens of people who were convicted and on death row who were ultimately proven innocent and wrongfully convicted. Life in prison is no walk in the park, and that's the alternative, and that's what we really should do. That gets into more of a political discussion, but what's going on in Texas, where they have 4 or 5 times as many executions as anyone else, and probably 5 times as many people on death row, even more so than California.
And Jared, those kind of cases really, I mean, murder is awful any which way, but when you're hired by somebody else to kill somebody, you're a hitman. Why do those cases rise to the level of death penalty eligible?
I think that has a lot to do with the political atmosphere in a place like Texas. And I think, taking Stephen's point and running with it a little bit, when you look at the other people who are alleged to have been involved in this specific killing, you have Miss Cortez, who was a flip. She was a co-defendant, co-conspirator who is getting a 35-year sentence for testimony. And Miss Delgado, who is the alleged mastermind, who is not going to be facing, as I understand it, the death penalty because of the tradition of her extradition from Mexico, where it was insisted upon that the death penalty be waived. If you look at Mr. Love and the sentence that was imposed in his case, is that really fair? Even if, you know, it is an absolutely heinous crime, if you look at the other people who were involved in their involvement,
right.
Does that really make sense?
Look, they might have helped it, they might have planned it, but he is accused of being the trigger man. When we come back, though, as Jared said, we're going to play you the testimony of Crystal Cortez, the woman who took that plea deal, and she testified. And oh boy, if you haven't seen it, wait until we come back. We'll be right back. So, Jared, as we listen to this, you can't help but think that this shooting happened in a very public place. And the idea of planning this out to the detail to try to figure out how to kill this doctor and where the appropriate place is, what do you make of the fact that that's where the chosen location was?
Well, I think several things. First is the defense theory apparently is that this wasn't necessarily planned to be a murder. So the fact that it was in a public place like this would tend to support, arguably, that type of theory of the case. But if this was, the prosecution is contending, a murder that was planned from the get-go, does it seem to be a very poor place to do it?
Yeah, it's a good point. And Steve, when you're watching this, look at these graphic photos here of this shooting. We talked about it earlier. I can't believe that this was successful. I mean, if you take the prosecution's case, that you had 3 individuals, 3 different reasons for coming together and doing this, and it looked like it worked.
It did work, and I could see why they do it in a parking lot, a dark parking lot. There's not other people around generally. I mean, we see it in the movies all the time where people try and commit crimes in parking lots. It's the ideal place for this to happen. And the problem is there's video, and it turns out there's witnesses.
Unlike the movies, this actually happened. This was real. And I want to start now with the testimony of Crystal Cortez. So she was the getaway driver, and she pled guilty to a reduced charge of murder and was only sentenced to 35 years in prison. And in exchange, she would cooperate and provide her testimony and testify against Mr. Love. So we were all watching to see what she had to say. So let's see what she had to say. Take a look.
I never went down the ramp until the day of the murder.
Are you sure that's the reason why you went down that way on the day of the murder?
I thought there was another exit down the ramp.
What would make you think there was an exit down the ramp?
I saw an exit sign and I thought it was going the opposite way.
So you go down there and stop, and that car's out of sight for over 40 seconds, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
What's going on during that time?
I'm trying to get back around to the main entrance to exit.
And your testimony is that when you come driving by there, then that's when you see Kendra Hatcher on the ground.
Yes, sir.
So, Steve, I guess the question is, was she paid $500 for a robbery, or was she paid $500 to help kill someone?
Well, according to her, she was paid $500, which doesn't seem like very much, to go kill somebody. An awful low amount to take a human life.
But the defense is saying that this was just a robbery gone wrong, right?
But why would you pay somebody to do a robbery? It doesn't make any sense.
So it's kind of...
That's why they're doing a robbery, because they need something.
Yeah, it's like a contingency fee.
Right.
It's kind of a little differently. Stephen Greenberg, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you.
Have a safe trip back home, and we want you back here.
All right, thank you.
All right, everybody, let's take a break. When we come back, a lot more to talk about in the Christopher Love case.